Welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. We're going to be talking about a little sales information today. How do you get better at selling? How do you get more comfortable with selling? And more importantly, if you're coming into the new year and you're thinking about, hey, I want to get my sales pipeline totally locked in, always knowing when that next deal is coming through and feeling confident and comfortable that the next actual sit-down conversation you have with the buyer is going to go well. We're going to dig into it today on today's podcast. If you're a first-time listener to the show, checking out the podcast for the first time, hello, my name's Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast. This is our humble little show where we talk about the things that actually work in business. None of that theoretical stuff or, pie in the sky stuff. It's the actual things that you can be doing today to grow and scale your business. Before we dive into today's episode, we have a word from one of the incredible businesses that sponsors the podcast. Let's hear this quick ad and we'll jump back in soon. See ya. When disaster strikes in your home, do you know who to count on? I'm talking about when water damage, fire damage, or mold becomes a problem in your house. You need someone that you can trust who's going to get your house back in working order. That's why I love recommending Best Option Restoration here in Northwest Arkansas. Best Option Restoration is the perfect choice for when you need that initial response for damage in your home. They're a national leader here in our Northwest Arkansas community, and they are restoration specialists that can give you the peace of mind you need when you're facing the unthinkable. Your home is somewhere special, which is why you need someone who sees the value in your home and wants to get you taken care of as quickly and efficiently as possible. Best Option Restoration is so committed to helping you with your home that they have an answer line that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where you can talk to an actual person about getting a specialist out to your home and resolving whatever damages you're seeing in your house. So if you experienced fire damage, water damage, or discovered mold in your home, call Best Option Restoration today to restore your house back to the home you love. Call 479-458-8840 or click the link in the episode description to contact Best Option Restoration today. So one of the most common points of conversation that come up from a business help perspective is, hey, I'm not selling enough. I'm not getting enough revenue. I am struggling to get the next customer. We've all been there. I've been there. There's definitely sometimes something in the water where it feels like everybody's buying. And then there's definitely times where it feels like nobody's buying. In fact, I've talked a lot on the show about this whole nobody buys during the holidays, or nobody buys during an election year, or nobody, all the things that people love to throw out. And I have found that in general, there is a bit of a seasonality to things. There is a little bit of an interesting, ups and downs and ebbs and flows to business. But despite all of those things, probably the worst thing you could do would be to take away the responsibility you have as a business owner and just blame the economy, blame the season, blame the weather. I say this because often it's hard to look in the mirror and realize how we need to grow, how we need to get better, how we need to improve. I myself have found myself looking in that mirror many times and not knowing what to fix or not knowing what the path forward is, just knowing something is totally broken. I can think about months in my business. I've been in business for 6 years now, but I can think of certain months where I looked in the mirror and thought, why are people telling me no? Why is this not working? Why am I not feeling any momentum? And so on and so on and so forth, that we've probably all felt in some way. Probably about 2 years ago, around year 4 of my business, I had a thought of, I really want to get serious about learning how to sell better in my business. I really want to get more confident as a salesperson. I feel like this is a real weakness of mine. And that wasn't ever because I never saw myself as a sales guy or like a sales consultant or anything like that. If you're watching this video or you're listening to the podcast and you're a first-time listener and you're like, this is the sales expert. No, I am not. These are things that I've just learned in doing business. I joked at my Tuesday morning in-person meetup where we have about a dozen business owners who get together and we just talk shop a little bit. I joked back then that, a lot of the expertise and knowledge that I have to share is really just painful mistakes that I've made along the way. I think a lot of times it's hard to come to terms with those mistakes and recognize that there is a process to learning how to do business better. There are wins and there are deep losses that if you're not careful, you'll repeat those mistakes. What's the whole expression, by the way? Like, oh man, I would butcher it now, but it's something around like, if there isn't like a pain in your mistakes, you'll never actually learn it. You're doomed to repeat it. And again, I know one of you who's listening or watching, you're thinking like, this is the expression. I know it's that easy, but I just can't catch it off the top of my head. All that to say, I have had those seasons where it feels like everybody's saying no. But like I said, around year 4 of my business, I thought, you know what? I really need to get better at sales. I really need to improve in my sales acumen. I would call myself today a pretty decent salesperson. I feel very comfortable in a conversation that is a, moderate to high sales number. Now, in the past, I have sold contracts that were as high as $60,000 and as, all the way down to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and all the way down from there to, 4-figure deals. If you know my story, you would know that in having those deals, I thought I was a really great salesperson. And then I realized that actually the customers buying from us just really liked the brand that I worked for, the consulting company that I worked for, which was a local consulting company. Anywho, when I finally struck out on my own and started Good Advice, I realized how little I knew about sales, how bad I was at it. And flash forward 6 years later, I feel pretty good if I'm going to sell someone on a $12,000 offer. I feel pretty good about that sales conversation. I feel pretty confident about having that conversation with someone. Doesn't mean they're always going to say no. And in fact, I think a good starting point for today's conversation, we're going to talk through today some things that you need to know in terms of how to sell more confidently. I'm going to give you 3 steps to sell more confidently today. And, if you listen to the podcast long term, I tend to ramble and kind of blab about different things that I'm kind of thinking about. So it's a bit of a rarity that I boil things down to, here's the 3 things you need to do. But as I was kind of thinking through this today, I thought, there really are 3 things that would be helpful to make you a better salesperson. And the very first one, this is, I think, the baseline starting point, is you have to be comfortable with someone telling you no. When you first start out with your business, there is so much emotionality tied to your business. There is so much, feelings tied to your business. For some of us, we quit a really great job and we put a lot of energy into finally starting that thing. Maybe you've had a loved one or a family member. I'll be really honest. I had a close family member whenever I was starting my business who, when I said, hey, I'm starting a business called Good Advice, they said, oh, Blake, oh no. And that hurt. That was tough. It was tough to get that from someone so close. Now, 6 years of pain and misery and having to learn how to run a business, in retrospect, I can see how that person was coming from a place of care and thoughtfulness. Rather, it's not anything I'm bitter about or think they were just trying to knock me down. But, we could probably all think about those people in our lives where you say, hey, I'm starting this business or I'm running this business, or maybe you've been running your business a long time. This is one of the questions that I get is I've run my business for a while now and I'll run into someone who I feel like knows me pretty well. And they go, hey, so what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm still doing that same thing. Or they ask, hey, are you still doing that thing? Weren't you doing some good thing, good something? People have known me for forever who get the name wrong. They're like, yeah, you are the Good Advice. And I'm like, it's just Good Advice, but yeah, sure. This is also, by the way, just a generally good concept to understand that people don't really care about you. That sounds like a gut punch, probably, but people are busy with their own lives. And the sooner you can understand that and not take things personal, the better off you'll be, especially when it comes to your buyer and to your customer, and understanding that your customer doesn't care about you. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about your long history. I was on a sales conversation one time where someone was selling me, and he opened up his sales pitch with, "Hey, we are a local business we've been around for 20 years and we have this long history of yada." And I really wanted to just be like, "Hey, let me stop you there because I really don't care." And in fact, when I told the person no, they came to the point of the pitch. They said, "Hey, would this be something you'd want to buy?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, I just don't really believe it's going to work. I don't really believe," it was like a marketing offer. I said, "I don't really believe you're going to do the things that you said you're going to do." And wasn't saying it like in a you're lying sort of way. I just said, "You know what? I just don't really believe the outcomes." And I'll never forget, he goes, "But I told you we've been in business for 20 years. Like, how do you think we've been in business so long if we can't deliver?" And his sort of linchpin on dealing with my objection was going back to the history of his business, which I never cared about in the first place. So, we've all been in those positions where someone says something negative about what you're doing, or more importantly, you finally get into one of those first sales conversations and you're nervous or you're uncomfortable. And, the person saying yes isn't just about cash flow or getting your first deal or making a little bit of money. It's also like you're proving to yourself or to those people that I can do this. Someone will buy this. And all I can tell you is that you're going to be told no. You're going to be told no kindly. You're going to be told no in the meanest of ways. You're going to be told no by people who really don't want to tell you no, but they feel bad. So they're going to tell you yes, but the seasoned business owner knows that it's actually, that it's actually no. If you've heard someone say things like, "Let me talk to my spouse about that," or "Let me think it over," or, "Hey, reach out to me in about 6 months." These are typically all ways that people let us down easy and tell us no because they don't feel confident or comfortable with actually saying no. So you're going to be told no a lot. In fact, I just came out of a season this last, I guess, about summertime where I know the pacing of sales and about how many conversations I need to have to get a win. Your close rate, the number of people, the percent of deals that you're going to close. If you're closing 20 to 30%, you're doing a good job. If you're closing every 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 3 conversations, you're doing a good job. But I was in a season where I think I had maybe 15, 20 not phone calls, in-person phone call, cold email that had led to conversations. I mean, even deals that I'd been curating for a while that I thought this is for sure closing now, that actually ended up being a no. And those seasons, now it doesn't mean that it's not painful or that it doesn't hurt or that it's not like a bummer or it's like, man, now I got to figure out, how am I going to navigate this? But also there's a little bit of, I don't call it like a pep in my step. It's not like I'm going to prove them wrong kind of deal. Nowadays, it's more of a, yeah, you're going to be told no. It's going to happen. And again, going back to my expression about looking in the mirror, it's also a great opportunity to look in the mirror and realize, okay, I got to keep fine-tuning this thing and working on this thing and developing this thing. So first thing I can tell you, you got to be comfortable with no. Understanding that not everyone will be your customer. Typically, my most common customer with good advice is a seasoned business owner. They have found a product that sells and they need help scaling the business. It's about creating systems. For some of them, they've done a great job with their business so far. Maybe they're doing $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in revenue. So they've actually started a brand that actually has momentum to it, but they have no business experience. They have no sales experience. They don't know who their customer is. And so for some customers, it might be around systems. For other customers, it may be like, hey, let's back up a little bit. Let's figure out the foundation of this thing before we press forward on it. That kind of customer is not the customer who's starting their business for the very first time and they're broke. They never sold anything before. That's not my customer. My customer is not and I sometimes get these emails on my website, and I try to always sort of politely respond. But I got this email the other day, or actually it was probably about a month ago, where it was a mother who emailed me. And she said, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you about a business idea that my son has." And it was, I think it was like a 13, 14-year-old kid. And maybe you can give him some advice. And, I responded and said, "Hey, I don't think I'm the right fit. This is typically who my customer is. It's typically someone who's a bit more on their journey. They've already made their first sales. They're in the process of scaling the business or really thinking about how do I grow my revenue." So I was trying to be very polite and kind about it and not just like, "You're not my customer. Get out of here," with like a water bottle spraying them or something. But part of being good at sales is knowing who your customer is and who your customer is not. And this woman was not my customer. I knew that. So be part of what's intrinsic to being comfortable with being told no is that sometimes you'll have conversations with people who you think is your customer and you realize they're not your customer. Or maybe they haven't realized they're your customer. Maybe they haven't really fully believed they need to hire you or your services. Excuse me. I think I'm getting a little cold here. Anyway, so that's the first one. You got to be comfortable with no and just understand, just do the math. Okay. If you think you are not a great salesperson, let's just throw out a number and say you're closing 10% of the conversations you have. Understand that for every one yes you get, you're getting 9 no's. That's just the math of it, right? So if you fall apart or you're crushed because of one no, you're in the wrong game. You got to develop thick skin and understand you're not the answer for everybody. Number 2, you have to sell as much as you can. This is not about being the used car salesperson who every person who, breathes in the direction of a car lot needs to be sold a car. It's not about volume from the sense of I'm going to call my aunt, my uncle, my childhood best friend, the ex-girlfriend from 15 years ago. And I'm kind of saying this a little bit jokingly because you see this sometimes with MLMs where I feel like this is more of a girl thing, by the way, because my wife has shown me messages like this where, she'll get a message from someone she hasn't talked to in years. And it's like, "Hey girl, I got all these cool things that are going on in my life. I'd love to sit down and tell you more about it." And I remember my wife went to this meetup for this girl she hadn't talked to in forever. And there was a bunch of other people there. And it was a sales pitch. It was an MLM sales pitch thing. So that is how many people treat sales of, I'm going to do it with as many people as possible. I'm going to reach out to as many people as possible. That's not the right way to do it. You want to really think about who your customer is. And when I say sell as much as you can, you want to have an active, strategic effort in your brand to acquire more customers. You want to dedicate some actual intentional effort to lead generation because you can't run a sustainable business on just who shows up one day. It's too slow to wait and rely on someone to show up, once every couple of months. "Hey, I'm talking to a friend of a friend said I needed to hire you." It's got to be more intentional than that. There's got to be more effort than doing something like that. So you got to be intentional and aggressive about actually going out, thinking about who your customer is, and dedicating time and energy to it. I say that because in my younger days, I was so averse to the emotional pressure around sales of closing this sale or not closing it means feast or famine for my business. And so it's like players before a big game. I would work myself up and get energized and excited about this sales call or sales conversation. And then the person would tell me no. And then I'd be, wrecked by it or bummed out by it or thinking how am I going to make this work? What am I going to do? And because of the emotionality behind it, I wouldn't have another sales conversation for 2 or 3 weeks. So, doing the math from earlier, if you're closing 1 in 10 deals and you're only having one sales conversation a month or every few weeks, I mean, do the math. You're closing maybe 2 deals a year. Now, you may have developed a really healthy pipeline with like a referral network, or maybe you're doing organic traffic with SEO. All of these things are great ways to bring in customers from a lead gen perspective. Those things are all fine. But if you haven't been intentional about how to do that, and you aren't actually having sales conversations to hone and train your craft, you'll find yourself wondering, why isn't this working? Ask yourself this question: how often am I actually in a sales conversation? For me, I have at least one every week. And I hold myself to that standard of I'm going to have a sales conversation every week. There are some seasons where I'm like, every day I'm going to have a sales conversation. In some ways, it is a volume game, in that if you do it enough, it will work. But in other ways, by putting yourself under a metric like that, you are ensuring that you are curating the sales pipeline that you have, that you're not just waiting on the ebbs and flows of the seasons of your business. You're not just waiting. A good way to think of this would be like, if I'm a roofer, I don't really have to think much about it when there was a hailstorm last night. But when there isn't when there hasn't been a storm recently, or it's not that time of the year where the weather's bad or what have you, you can know that you're going to be looking at the phone wondering, why isn't it ringing? Because you aren't putting time curating your pipeline and actually training those muscles. So if you want to get better at sales, you have to put yourself in a situation where you are actually selling to people. And part of that too, I've talked a lot on the show about ways to navigate those sales conversations. I think that might be a separate episode. But I will say that, you can always doing some kind of debrief after a sales conversation. My wife got me this cute notebook forever ago where I could actually like write when someone told me no, why did they say no? Where was there the disconnect? Was it price? Was it, did I talk them out of the sale? Which is something that I frankly do a lot. I talk people out of the sale. I think if I was a little bit less of an honest person, I'd probably be making a lot more money. But a perfect example of this with the podcastable business, one of the most common questions I ask is someone says, "Hey, I need help starting a podcast." And I say, "Do you like podcasts?" is one of my first questions. And when someone says, "No, I hate podcasts," which is one of like the first things I almost always hear something like this or some version of this. "I don't like podcasts. I don't see what the big hype is. I don't know why people want to do it." And yet here they are being like, "I need help starting a podcast." So someone might say, "Oh, I hate podcasts. I've never even listened to one." Well, then I usually ask, "Well, why do you want to start a podcast then?" Now I've found that sometimes talking people out of the sale leads to a healthier relationship with that person until down the road when they're actually ready to buy, they become a much better customer. But being totally transparent, I have a tendency to be very empathetic. And, someone tells me, all the things going on with their business, and it wouldn't be uncommon for me to say, "Hey, you don't need to spend money on this right now. Hey, you shouldn't do this right now." Now, challenging myself, I had a Don Young, who runs the advertising guys. He had a great comment at our Tuesday group where he said, "Hey, never assume if someone wants to buy this or not." And he was giving that advice to people at the table. And I heard that and thought, man, I wish I had heard that years ago. Because of the number of times that I would be in a sales conversation with someone and I would say, "Hey, you don't want to buy this. You don't want to spend your money on this." When actually maybe they did. So anyway, random segue about sales. So number one, you got to be comfortable with hearing no. Number two, you want to put yourself in a position to become a better salesperson by being in as many sales conversations as possible, by being intentional about when those sales conversations are happening. And number three, you have to be confident in your price. You have to know your price. Now, this isn't like unfounded confidence where, you sell a trash removal service or you pick up people's garbage for them, and the price you're charging is $100,000 a month, and you say, "Well, I know what I'm worth." You know, I think I know what I'm worth. It doesn't matter how confident you are; no one's going to buy that, right? When I talk about confidence or knowing your price, what I'm actually talking about is you know what your competitors are typically charging, you know your expertise, and you know what honestly. When I say honestly, I don't mean the negatives, which we typically go to, but the positives as well. And frankly, more of the positives of I know I have a quality perspective here. I know I have years of experience. I know the people I've helped in the past. I know that I'm good at this. So, having confidence with those things, you should know your price and you should feel comfortable telling your buyer your price. So, for me, there was a book that I mentioned this morning at a networking event. I love the book, The Transparency Sale by Todd Capone. Todd's an incredible salesperson. Check him out on LinkedIn. He's phenomenal. One of my all time favorite salespeople out there. And something Todd talks about is going into a meeting very candid and transparent about what the price is. I love this concept because when I was first selling, all I knew was this weird cat and mouse game of talking about the value. Let's talk about the value. I'm going to deliver value. And you've probably heard this too of like lead with value, show them the value. And I've even been in sales conversations where the person would use that expression with me and not really understand what it meant. I had a guy who tried to sell me on a service and it was some ridiculous offer. He was like, "Yeah, I take, small business coaches or consultants and I turn them into $1 billion brands." And I was like, $1 billion? What? Like you by yourself take a one-person show and turn them into $1 billion? I was like, you're high. This is ridiculous. But so I remember responding with like, this doesn't make any sense. And I wasn't trying to make him feel bad, but I was also calling him out. I'm like, what? And his response was, "Well, Blake, I'm just trying to give you value today," which I remember hearing that thinking like, okay, yeah, I've heard that a million times, but you don't know what that means. It's not something you say, it's something you actually do. And I remember these early days of sales conversations really, someone says, "What does it cost?" And maybe you've been in this conversation where someone has you on a cold call or, they come to your door and you go, "Okay, great. What does it cost?" And they go, "Well, hang on, before I get into that, let me tell you some more about how awesome this is and the great products we have and how it's working." "Okay, great. Well, what's the price?" "Well, hang on. And I was even in a sales conversation months ago where a guy was telling me about all the amazing things his service did. And I said, "Okay, hey, great. What's the cost? What's the cost of it? What's it going to cost me?" And he goes, "Well, I'm glad you asked." And he pulled out his laptop and he opened up a PowerPoint presentation. And I knew what he was about to do. He's about to go through his slide deck and then end with now, and this is what people typically say in sales, which is incredibly obnoxious. And if you find yourself saying this, I think you're missing it in sales. But I knew there was going to be a slide in there that was going to be something like, "Now, if this could triple your revenue, or this could 10 times your revenue, or this could bring you in this many extra thousands of dollars per month, what would that mean for you, Blake?" And then he would wait for me to be like, "Wow, that'd be really great." "Okay, yeah, I thought so." "Well, hey, for a low price of $299 a month or, 10 grand a year or whatever, we can actually do this for you right now. Now, would you like to sign up today?" Whatever that would be, whatever that pitch would be, it's the same tired, exhausting, here's all the features. And then I finally end with how obvious it is. You'd be crazy not to do it. And here's the cost. Here's the price. So he pulls up the PowerPoint, pulls up the laptop. And I just say, no. Hey, just tell me what it costs. I don't want to see the pitch. I don't want to know about it. What's the price? And he goes, "It's $3,000. And I go, "I'm not your customer. I don't see the value in it. I knew from when we first sat down that I didn't want it. If you had asked me if I was a fit from the get-go, instead of just implying that I was, I would have told you I'm not looking to buy that and I'm not interested." And that's not a challenge, which by the way, sometimes we treat it like a challenge where, sometimes we all get these LinkedIn DMs where someone says, "Hey, I'm going to tell you about this service." I had a guy who DM'd me and said, "Hey, here's a service we do, a marketing service." And I said, "Hey, I'm not interested. I'm not your customer." And he goes, "How do you know you're not my customer? How do you know you're not my buyer?" And I was like, "Dude, just give me a break. I'm not interested. Which, by the way, there's plenty of people who we have a conversation. I say, hey, I am your customer. I do want to know more. Tell me more about that, for sure. But going back to Todd's comment from his book, The Transparency Sale, getting really candid and transparent about the price from the get-go. I was talking to a realtor a few months ago who she said, hey, I need to do some work with good advice. I need your help. I need it badly. And I said, okay, are you making any money? Are you making any sales? She goes, no, I'm not. And I said, here's the deal. You should come to the Tuesday morning group. The Tuesday morning group is a free group. We got a dozen business owners who come from all different revenue numbers. And you can come ask your questions and get some really great advice. She said, well, Blake, I want to work with you. And I said, yep, I get that. By the way, I even telling this story, this makes me sound so, I didn't say it in an egotistical way. I was just like, hey, you know what? You're not my customer. Here's how I know that is because you're not making any money. Typically, someone who hires me is going to spend at least $5,000. Is that an investment that you're interested in making? And she goes, oh gosh, no way. And I go, that's what I thought. Hey, come to the Tuesday morning group. I think you're going to get some great direction from that group. Or there's also plenty of other competitors out there. You can check out one of them. You can see one of them as an option, and they might be able to lead you in the right way at a dollar amount that makes sense for you. So by having that conversation from the get-go, we've now saved each other a lot of time. Mostly because my expertise, the way I've valued my expertise and the help that she needs, we're mismatched. She doesn't have more than maybe a couple $100 to spend on some outside service. And I don't have the widget that costs $200 that I can just give her. That's like, yeah, plug this in, install it into your business. This is how it works. So by putting that out there from the get-go, we've saved each other an enormous amount of time. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't conversations where sometimes you have to help people understand. Someone might say a great conversation from like an SEO perspective. Someone says, hey, what does SEO cost? And it's an annual contract. It's 12 months and it's $750 a month. So you're going to spend about $9,000 a year getting organic traffic to your website. And someone might say, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. Okay, yeah. So, you're telling me it's expensive. What are you spending right now on your marketing? We spend about $80,000 a year on, pay-per-click advertising, on paid media. Okay, $80,000 a year. What's been your return on investment of that? And someone might say, oh, it's been a huge money pit. We haven't made any money on it. It's blood on the streets. It's horrible, yada, yada. And so the conversation then turns to, well, help me understand something because I'm confused. You're spending $80,000 a year on something that's not generating you any revenue, yet you're telling me this other thing that costs you $9,000 a year. You're telling me it's too expensive. And help me understand, if this works, if you're getting traffic organically and you're getting sales organically, and you were able to get so much business from that you could stop the paid advertising completely, it sounds like you'd be not just making money, which is your first problem, but that you'd also be saving the $80,000 that you're spending. So the net positive would be it may be significantly higher than just the ROI on this organic marketing working for you. So help me understand, why is this too expensive then? And you don't say that in like a manipulative way. It's just honest. I'm just curious. Hey, help me understand this. And you'd be surprised when people say in return, like, oh yeah, you're totally right. I didn't think of it that way. Or I wasn't totally sure about that. And oh, now it makes total sense. Of course. And usually it's like way more complicated than that. Usually there's also like levels of someone says, oh yeah, well, we told ourselves in our strat plan that we were going to commit to this for 3 years and we're just at the end of year 1. So I can't change it yet. And to that, if I don't know the person well enough, I might say, okay, yeah, I get it. No big deal. Let's talk in 2 years. Let's see if you're happy with yourself there. Or hey, let's talk in 6 months. And if you haven't turned a corner, I'd love another conversation. Or if they know them somewhat well, I might even push a little bit harder and say, dude, you're going to commit to 3 years of something that's costing you $80,000 a year? Like, really? 3 years is an eternity. Now, if you started this a month ago, let that thing sit a little bit, see where it goes. But even doing this a year and it isn't working, what's your plan for it to begin working? How are you guys? Are you pivoting in some way? Are you changing your strategy? No, it's someone else's problem. Oh, that doesn't sound like a great recipe. I'd love to help you today, though. All this to say, you have to be comfortable with your price to be able to sell well. Otherwise, people are never going to see you as the expert. They're going to see you as someone where they say, hey, what does it cost me? Or like, what's the answer? What's the solution? And you say, well, it could cost anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000, which is a pretty big band. And it gets me wondering, like, well, why? Why is there such a big range? Or I quoted a guy, this was a corporation locally years ago, before I was doing Good Advice, where they had asked for a bid or an RFP. So I sent over the proposal, and I think it was like $68,000, like 721, something like that. And this came out of a spreadsheet that we would put stuff into, and then it would spit out a number, like a pricing spreadsheet. So you put numbers in, like the hours, whatever, and it would spit out a number. Well, I gave it to him, and he was like, I don't get it. Like, why this number? So being comfortable as an expert means being able to know the price point and confidently say, hey, if you want this problem solved, this is what it costs. So number one, be comfortable with someone saying no. You're going to hear it a lot. Number two, put yourself in a position to practice selling as much as you can. And number three, know your price point. Know your price point. Be comfortable about your price point. And probably the last thing is make sure you're delivering on that price point. If you're promising all this value from the get-go, and then someone works with you and they say, geez, they were expensive, we didn't get much from them, you might have a problem in your business. I talked about in my last episode coming into 2025 with $40,000 already sold before January even hit. And a lot of that, a lot of those conversations have been contingent on me delivering what I said I would do. It's scary when you can't just sell something and then hand it off to someone else. When you are responsible for the outcomes you promise someone for, and your integrity is on the line, that's when it can get pretty scary. But that is the right way to do business because it's going to force you to improve, to get better, and to actually deliver on what you said you're going to do. Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's podcast episode. I so appreciate you. If you're a first-time listener, what the heck are you waiting on? Click the subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. Don't forget, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice if you ever want to support the podcast. Or if you're a business, you want to advertise on our podcast, you can always reach out, blake@goodadvicecoaching.com. That's today's good advice. I wish you well. Go sell a lot of money, do a good job, and let's celebrate a great year coming up. See ya.